Not everyone who shares your blood shares your heart. That day, I came home late after a 3-day work trip. I was tired, hungry, and all I wanted was to step into the little kitchen where my mother used to make baked noodles for me and Ethan when we were kids. But the first thing I saw was a sign on the front lawn. For sale, by owner. I slammed on the brakes. My heart clenched in my chest. This was the house my parents spent their lives paying off. The place where I took my first steps on the wooden floor. Where I pulled all-nighters studying for college exams. And now, it was being sold off like some bargain at a yard sale. No one called me. No one asked me. I rushed to the front door. The lock had been changed. I backed away, heart pounding. Only one name echoed in my head: Ethan. My little brother. He had just gotten out of rehab 3 months ago, after being arrested for theft and drug use. I was the only one who showed up at the gate to pick him up. I opened my home to him, cooked for him, took him to job interviews. I chose to believe in him, again. And now, he was selling the very house our mother left to me in her will. I called Ethan. He didn't answer. I called the police, but they said it was a civil matter. They couldn't intervene if Ethan had paperwork proving ownership. I walked back to my car, hands trembling, and there it was, a thin piece of paper taped to my windshield. Do not park on property that does not belong to you. Thank you. I nearly broke down right there. This was my home, my family, my memories, and now, my brother had become a thief. We used to be so close. When we were kids, Ethan would chase me around the house, hands covered in dirt, firing off the silliest questions. Anna, if we planted money, what kind of tree would grow? I remember answering with complete seriousness, probably an ATM tree. He laughed so hard, like he'd just discovered the meaning of life, then ran to tell our parents as if he'd cracked some universal code. We shared a bed until I started high school. Every night, Ethan begged me to tell him stories, not fairy tales though. No, he wanted to hear about the future. About how he'd become a robot engineer. How I'd be a doctor. How we'd buy Mom a new house. Bigger, with a tomato garden and a fish pond. Mom worked night shifts as a nurse and usually came home just as the sun was rising. Her face always looked so tired, but she never forgot to leave us little notes. Anna, don't forget to pick Ethan up from school. Ethan, eat your breakfast. Your sister made the sandwiches. Dad drove cross-country trucks. Sometimes he was gone for a whole week. Whenever he came home, he'd leave $10 in the drawer for me and $5 for Ethan. Your brother doesn't know how to save yet, he'd say with a wink. I never thought twice about it. Not until Ethan started to feel overlooked. He began saying strange things around 16. Why does everyone always praise you for holding the family together? What about me? I never had an answer. When I was 18, I got into a state university. Ethan didn't. Not because he wasn't smart, but because he didn't even try. He started staying out late, borrowing friends' cars, getting lost in things I didn't have the heart to name. When I was 20, I got a call. Ethan had been arrested for stealing a friend's laptop. I dropped a semester to go home. I stood outside that holding cell for hours, waiting for visiting time. He didn't cry, he just asked, "Are you disappointed in me?" I looked at him, hair a mess, hands trembling from withdrawal, and I said, "I believe you can be different." That was my first mistake. I didn't tell our parents. I took out a loan meant for my tuition to pay for his rehab. I checked him into a treatment center. I told him, "Don't make me lie for you again." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and then he relapsed. Twice. Every time he slipped, a piece of my heart cracked off and disappeared. But I still believed, because he was my brother. Because once, long ago, he believed we'd grow up and live side by side forever, in a little house with tomatoes and fish. And nothing to fear but bedtime stories. My parents died in a car accident at the end of 2018. It was a highway pileup, a multi-vehicle collision while they were driving home from my mom's 60th birthday dinner. I remember, I'd turned down the invite. Said I had work. I never got to say goodbye. I handled everything, the insurance, the funeral, even picking the music for their memorial. Ethan was in the middle of a rehab program at the time. I didn't want to break him, so I lied. Everything's fine. They left the house to both of us. Just like we expected. I thought I was protecting him. I didn't want him to feel abandoned. But the truth was, my mother left everything, including the house, to me. To my daughter Anna, the one who gave up her youth to care for her brother and for us. I leave the house and all rights to the estate. Ethan must find his own path. But I trust she'll help him when she feels ready. Signed, Mom. I held the will in my hands. Shaking. I hadn't expected much. But I didn't expect words so final. Like she had seen everything. Understood everything. I looked at the lawyer and said, "Keep this between us. Ethan can still live in the house." He looked at me for a long second and replied, "Sacrifice shouldn't come with naivety." I just gave him a sad smile. After the funeral, Ethan moved in with me. At first, things were fine. He got up early, looked for jobs, helped with the yard, cooked a few meals. I started to believe maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. But one evening, while organizing an old filing cabinet, I found a folded copy of Mom's will, tucked behind an old budgeting notebook. A copy I never gave to anyone except the lawyer. The very next day, Ethan asked me something that made my heart drop. "Do you really think Mom wanted just one of us to have everything?" I looked at him, confused, guarded. "I'm not planning to sell the house. Ethan, you're welcome to stay here." He smiled, but it wasn't the warm, goofy grin I remembered. It was tight, bitter. "And what if you get married someday? Gonna kick me out then?" I didn't answer. That was the first time I saw eyes that weren't my brother's, but a stranger's. Someone sizing up property, not memories. I started locking the safe. Changed my bank passwords. But I didn't ask Ethan to leave. Deep down, I still felt something like responsibility. Or maybe, just a fear of losing the only family I had left. What I didn't know was that my hesitation had given Ethan the perfect opening to betray me again. That Saturday, I left for a 2-day work trip to attend a conference in Seattle. Before I left, I locked the safe tight and reminded Ethan to close the windows. The weather forecast had called for rain. He nodded, eyes glued to his phone. Strangely calm. When I came home Monday evening, everything had changed. The front door lock had been replaced. My car remote no longer opened the electric gate. I stepped out of the car and saw a piece of paper taped to the living room window. "This property is currently under transfer of ownership. Unauthorized entry is prohibited." I thought I was seeing things. I called Ethan, he didn't pick up. I called the police. They showed up, listened to my story, checked the documents, and told me Ethan was no longer at the property. But in their hands was a property power of attorney, allegedly signed by my mother. I froze. The signature looked almost identical. But I knew my mother never signed her full name that way. It was forged, the officers said. If both parties have legal documents, this becomes a civil dispute. You'll need to take it to court. I wanted to scream, to shout, "I'm her daughter. I planned the funeral. I raised my brother. I've lived in this house since I was 5. But the law doesn't care about feelings." I called my lawyer that very night. A week later, after some digging, he came back with this. Ethan used a forged power of attorney to transfer the house to a local real estate firm. The documents show clear signs of fraud. I couldn't believe it, not because he did it, but because he planned it all. He forged Mom's signature, made copies of the will, changed the locks while I was gone, claimed I had abandoned the property to legitimize the transfer. It felt like the blood had been drained from my body. In the very house where we once played tag, where I read him bedtime stories, my little brother had become a thief. And through it all, Ethan said nothing. He blocked me on everything. My lawyer filed an emergency injunction to freeze the transaction. Thankfully, the real estate firm hadn't finalized the sale. The house was put on legal hold. And I became temporarily homeless, renting a small apartment on the edge of the city, waiting for the court date. Every morning, I went to work like a ghost. Every night, I stared at the photo of my parents on the nightstand, my chest aching, not because I'd lost a house, but because I'd lost my brother. 7 months later, I walked into courtroom 3 at the county courthouse with a thick folder in my hands, filled with original documents. Forged copies, email records, and handwriting analysis reports. Ethan didn't show up. His lawyer came in his place, cold, polished, indifferent, no apology, no eye contact. I sat there, staring straight at the judge as he asked me, "Why didn't you press charges against your brother for forgery?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Because I don't want my mother to be ashamed of him in heaven." In the end, after several hearings, the court ruled in my favor, declaring me the sole legal owner of the house based on the notarized will and the evidence of Ethan's fraud. I won, but no one waited for me outside the courthouse. No one said, "Congratulations on getting justice." I stood there alone, on the cold stone steps, in the bitter January wind, holding a verdict in my hands and an emptiness in my heart that no piece of property could ever fill. I moved back into the old house. Everything was the same, and yet, nothing was. The dining table where Mom once helped me with math now sat under a thin layer of dust. Ethan's room, stripped bare. The curtains gone. Our family photo on the shelf, now missing a piece. And a presence. I started a blog, not to shame Ethan, but to warn others like me. People who trusted family blindly. Who believed that blood meant loyalty. I called it Assets and Trust. A space where I write about protecting your finances without losing your compassion. One day, a letter arrived. No return address. "Anna, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Not about the documents. Not about the house. But for forgetting that you were the only one who never gave up on me. I don't deserve to come back. I know that. But if someday, somehow, you find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be somewhere, still hoping to hear that story again. The one about the ATM tree." Ethan. I sat in silence for hours. I didn't cry. I just sat. I haven't written back, and maybe I never will. But I kept the letter, tucked inside my journal, right next to Mom's will. A quiet reminder that money can be stolen, a house can be forged away, but character is the only thing we can choose to give up ourselves. These days, I run a free financial literacy class at the church every Sunday. I teach people how to write wills, how to protect their assets, how to read contracts, but most of all, how to draw boundaries within love. I'm no longer the naive Anna I used to be. I'm a woman who's learned that protecting yourself from someone you love isn't betrayal, it's survival. I haven't forgiven Ethan, but I've forgiven myself. Because in the end, I chose to live, not to endure. And this house? It's no longer a museum of a broken family. It's where I'm learning how to love again, without losing myself in the process.